Hello and welcome to this tutorial. So today what I'm going to be showing you is how you can remove falsy values from a JavaScript array. So in JavaScript there are 6 falsy values. So a falsy value is supposed to represent no value or the absence of value. So in JavaScript, false, undefined, null, not a number, 0 and an empty string are all falsy values. Every other value in JavaScript is a truthy value. Now, because falsy values represent no value or the absence of value, it's quite common that you would want to remove those from an array, so you are only left with truthy values. So first of all, I'll show you how to remove falsy values from an array, and then I'll show you how you can remove falsy values except for some of the values there. So for example, you might not want to remove these zeros or empty strings, but still remove these 4. So I'll show you how you can do that also. Okay, so the falsy values in this array here are null, 0 and an empty string. And at the moment, I'm just simply logging it to the console. So if you want to go ahead and remove all falsy values from this array, what you can do is use the filter method. So you call that on the array, and you have to pass in a function here, and this function is going to run as many times as there are items in your array. So in this case, this function is going to run 6 times, and each time the function runs, you have available to you the value of the array item that is currently being iterated through. Now, the way that filter works is that it creates a new array, and that's going to be the return value of calling filter. So I'm going to log the new array after I log the original array to the console. And what happens each time the function runs that you passed into filter, if the value that it returns is true, then a value is going to be kept and stored in the new array. If it's false, then it's going to be discarded and won't be included in the array. So if I make the return value of the passed in function false, then you end up with an empty array because every item is discarded. If it returns true every time, then you end up with the same array that you called filter upon, because nothing is discarded, everything is kept and stored in the new array. So what you want here is a rule that's going to be true when a value is truthy and false when a value is falsy. So what you can do is use an inbuilt function called boolean. So what this does is it returns true or false, the boolean value true or false, based upon the value that you pass into it. So you want to pass in item to it. So it's going to check each of these items each time the function runs, and it's going to return true if it's truthy, so it will return true for the emojis, and falsy for null, 0 and the empty string. So when we take a look at our output now, you'll see that this has removed the falsy values from the array. So it can be as simple as this. You can even shorten the syntax. So there's a little trick here. You can just pass in the boolean function here, and it's going to work in exactly the same way as all that syntax I just wrote. Now, the reason it works is that boolean is a function and it accepts an argument. So filter's actually automatically passing the item value into boolean, boolean's making the evaluation of whether it's truthy or falsy, and then it's returning true or false as the return value of the function. So it's actually exactly the same method as before, just a shorter syntax. So you can use this one or the longhand. They're both going to do the same thing. Sometimes it actually makes sense to use the longhand because it's more understandable if someone else is reading your code, but you can use either one and they'll work in exactly the same way. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes you might want to remove falsy values except for 1 or 2. So commonly 0 might be actually a value that you don't want to remove from the array, and the same with an empty string. So this could represent a non-answer or an empty answer from a respondent that you don't want to actually remove as a value. So if you want to remove falsy values except 0 and an empty string, what you can do here is extend this logical statement with the OR operator. So at the moment, if this is true on its own, then the return value is going to be true. What you say here is OR item equals 0. So OR item equals 0. So it's going to be true now if item equals 0 or the item is truthy. And for an empty string, it's exactly the same method. So now it's if the item is an empty string, or it's 0, or it's truthy, then the function is going to return true, and filter is going to include it in the new array that it creates. So let's just check that worked. So you see now that 0 and empty string are included in the array. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider hitting the like button down below this video, because it helps us with the algorithm and others to find this video. And if you'd like to see more content like this from us in the future, don't forget you can subscribe to the channel.